I'm Maha Al-Farah. I am the Managing Director of the Galilee Foundation. We're very happy to have all of you here today for our first webinar of the year. We're hoping to have many more throughout the year to do with Palestinian issues, cultural, educational, musical. So please do sign up to our newsletter if not already. And our webinar today is on social media, Israel and Palestine's new battleground. We're very happy to have Nadim and Muna here, longtime digital rights defenders, to discuss the topic with us. As you know, mass surveillance of Palestinians is nothing new, but over the last few years, Israel has extended this to the digital world, and they're now considering a dangerous social media censorship bill known as the Facebook bill, which will force websites and apps to remove content. So things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, they've got the right to remove content. So we want to discuss what is this going to mean for Palestinians and even for Israeli human rights activists. So who better to discuss this topic than Nadim, Nashif, and Muna Shtaya. Nadim is the executive director and co-founder of Hamle, the Arab Center for the Advancement of Social Media, and a social policy analyst for Al-Shabaka. And Muna, who's actually doing her master's here in London, is the advocacy advisor also at Hamle and a non-resident scholar for the Middle East Institute. I should actually congratulate both of you for Hamle's work for winning a Freedom of Expression Award from the Index of Censorship. So thank you for your tireless efforts in educating us and in fighting for freedom of expression. I should probably stop talking now. Just to talk about the format of the show, actually, I will first, I'll start with a few questions, and then if anyone from the audience has questions, please pop it in the Q&A box rather than the chat, because it's just easier to monitor. So let's begin. Nadim, tell us how Israel has been fighting the Palestinian narrative online and how they've been trying to silence Palestinian voices.
Yes, thank you, Maha, and friends in Galilee Foundation for putting together this session and this webinar. And we're happy to be with you and to share the information and to have this discussion. Basically, we going back a bit in the years to the years of 2015-16, when there were more and more clashes and tension around Jerusalem. At that time, the Israeli government headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, and also in the leadership there were Gilad Erdan, the Minister of Security at that time, and Ayelet Shaked, the Minister of Justice. They had this approach that basically the source of the problem in the conflict here is basically the incitement and the social media. So instead of getting to the roots and having some kind of peaceful settlement and some kind of perspective and future for both people, they went into a direction of if power would not solve it, more power will solve it. And this was the approach of the Israeli government. And then they said that the problem is social media. The problem is that Palestinians are inciting in social media, and we have to stop this. And they had the aim basically to silence Palestinian voices from the internet and the social media in general, but more specifically in Facebook, as most of Palestinians and most of Israelis are using, and the most popular network at that time especially was Facebook. So they started basically saying to the company that we will block you basically if you do not have our definition of what is incitement and what is being allowed and not allowed. And after different threats, basically there were different meetings and some kind of understandings between the company and Gilad Erdan at that time, the ministers Gilad Erdan and Ayelet Shaked. So the basic arrangement was that their cyber unit in Israel, the cyber unit, is functioning as the focal point between the companies, the social media companies in general. I mean, I'm speaking about Facebook, but more or less the same dynamics with other social media companies. And basically, they are documenting the secretive Israeli agencies that are making the surveillance. I mean, the basic assumption is that these days, every Palestinian social media account is being surveilled through different technologies. And all of these secretive agencies, including the ones that belong to the police, the ones that belong to the army, 8900, all these units that we keep hearing about, the technological units, including also the general secret services, tech agencies, they all basically surveil the Palestinian social media. They send the request to the cyber unit, which is a unit under the Israeli Ministry of Justice. And this unit basically ask the takedowns, with the social media companies. So this process has been happening since 2016, and it's becoming more and more every year. I mean, it's double and triple. The last statistic that we have is that in 2020, there were more than 20,000 requests of takedowns. When we say 20,000 takedowns, this means 20,000 emails, that each one of the emails, it has an Excel sheet with many requests. So if you can imagine how huge this phenomena of takedowns, the percentage of the positive answers from Facebook is around 89–90% of the requests. So the vast majority of the requests is being answered positively. And then this is a big phenomena, but it does not stop with the official Israel. There is the semi-official Israel, or I mean, they define themselves as NGOs, but we call them Congos because they are very supported governmentally. They are coordinated with the government, and they are somehow part of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Now it's a unit in another ministry, but before that, at that time in 2016, it was an independent ministry that coordinated all these efforts of smear campaigns, of
just to clarify, is this is the Israeli cyber unit, and they're the ones that are making these like 20,000 requests to take down Palestinian content?
Yeah, so you have the official Israel, which is acting through the cyber unit and giving the request to the companies, but you have also the Ministry of Strategic Affairs that they basically fund other NGOs and the independent company to do the work that they don't want to do as the official Israel. And then you have NGOs or groups, I mean, they are basically trolls, like ACT-IL, 4IL, and you have tens of thousands of people who are organized around applications. They get notifications and they are being asked basically to report, mass report certain Palestinian content that one editor is sitting and sending them the request. Now, obviously, this is very problematic because, I mean, the system of reporting was not meant to be abused in this way of online brigading. The idea is that you as an individual user, you would see something that is not appropriate and you would complain, but not to do manipulation of the system. And this is what the Israelis are doing. Putting lots of money, governmental and other money, in these organizations, and they are mobilizing these people in many cases, actually, the people who are reporting don't understand Arabic and they don't know exactly what they are reporting, actually, but somebody told them to do so. So this is what's happening. So in short, I mean, basically, these are the two main strategies that the Israeli has been using since 2016 to silence Palestinian voices and to fight Palestinian narrative on the online.
So we've heard what the Israeli governments are doing. What about, Muna, tell us about what Facebook, or Meta as it's now known, and other social media policies towards Palestinian content. How how are they biased?
Thanks again for hosting us today. So yeah, the social media companies, not only Meta, but generally speaking, social media companies and other digital platforms are discriminating against Palestinian rights, trying to silence Palestinians, and sometimes by complying to the Israeli government and the the Israeli cyber unit requests, they are also contributing to silence Palestinians and suppresses our voices. Not only here, we are not talking about only Palestinians, but also we are talking about allies and our pro-Palestinian comrades around the world. And having said that, that means that these companies are not comply with the international human rights law, neither with the human rights and business principles. And that's problematic. and if we are talking about Palestine and how, like in the last decade, let's say, how the conflict is being moved from the offline space, from the ground, and it was moved to the online space or to the social media platforms, where there is a war in narrative, where Palestinians are trying to document the human rights violations that we are exposed to on the ground and sharing that on the social media platforms in order, or like we are trying to mobilize and organize people around the world, tell our own story by like our own storyteller, by our people, because as we can see that the international mainstream media usually they have this kind of a victimization for Palestinians. They don't have like this humanization, or they are not telling stories about Palestinians. So whenever we are traveling, we are hearing that Palestine, like that's a land of war, or sometimes they don't know Palestine. They know only Pakistan. That's because that we don't have like the space to spread our narrative, and that came as a result of the digital discrimination against Palestinians on the social media platforms. So basically, social media platforms are monitoring the Palestinian content when they are complying with the request from the Israeli cyber unit, and they are taking down the Palestinian content, or they are suspecting Palestinian account, or they are monitoring whatever like Palestinians are posting as the documentation of human rights violations. They are contributing to spread, or to spread the Israeli narrative and hide the Palestinian narrative. By doing so, they are affecting the international perception of what's happening in Palestine and how the Palestinian cause is going on the ground. So basically, having all this kind of content censorship, whether it's content takedown, content restriction, shadow banning, or whatsoever. Sometimes they are censoring specific hashtags, as happened in
Can
May.
you tell us what shadow banning is?
Yeah, sure. So shadow banning is when social media companies, like when digital rights defenders like ourselves, were pushing social media companies to stop taking down the Palestinian content and to stop having this kind of suspensions of the account and the content. They sometimes they keep this kind of content, but they reduce the viewership of your content. And we have heard many cases from influencers and social media users that their posts and their stories, basically, whenever they are talking about their personal issues, it gets thousands of views. While if we are talking about human rights documentation or Palestinian news, it gets like less viewership. We've seen over the past weeks, Ahmed Shahabuddin, the journalist Ahmed Shahabuddin, and many others from the influencers on the social media platforms were complaining. And this is not new. This started earlier. It was like a big issue during May escalations, but it's not stopping here. Palestinians are also have this kind of a creative way. Maybe we can talk about that later on the next question. Creative ways how they try to overcome the obstacle of this kind of content censorship from what these social media companies are practicing on Palestinians.
I've got a question for you, Mona, but it's funny. What's your relation with the Palestinian Prime Minister? Literally, Mona was saying to me, I promise there's no relation to the Palestinian Prime Minister, but you know, if you'd like to respond.
I swear to God, no relationship.
Nadeem, tell us about tell us about the Facebook bill which Israel is actually considering, and what it will mean exactly, and how is it different to what's already been happening?
Yeah, so lately, basically, Gideon Saar, the Israeli Justice Minister, he's pushing and putting all his weight basically to push this new bill. It's called the Facebook bill. And it's actually kind of a new version of an old bill that at the time of Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was the prime minister, his coalition was trying to push, and finally it did not pass. And now it's coming in a different form, which is actually worse, because I mean, it's called the Facebook bill, but it means to affect all the internet. So the basic idea is that the Israeli government and the general attorney will have the right to ask Israeli courts basically to issue order for takedowns. So any content that by the Israeli definition is inciting or against the Israeli law, using these kind of vague definition, basically if you say I am resisting occupation or any kind of resisting these policies, that would be called incitement and it will be part of the Israeli Penal Code. And then what happened basically that the court will issue this order in many cases by one side with secret evidence. I mean, so you can imagine how much clear and transparent that process. And then the company, especially the social media companies, has to, to do the takedowns in 48 hours. If not, they will have very high fines of hundreds of thousands of shekels. Which basically what we expect that will happen is that the companies will take them down, because obviously these are for-profit companies and they don't want to lose and they don't want to get into a position where they are clashing with the Israeli government. But this does not stop on the level of social media, because according to the right now version of the law, it would be also on any website. So it could be, for example, if there's a Palestinian media news outlet, they would force them to take down certain piece of content that, according to them, is inciting or violating the Israeli law. So it goes beyond even just the social media. It goes all over the internet, and it has another part, a third part, that's speaking about websites that Israel does not have the, let's say, the control over it because of geography. So in that case, they will issue an order to the Israeli internet service providers to basically block these websites, so Israeli readers would not read them or cannot access them.
So because they don't have the right to block the website, they will contact the digital provider to block.
Yeah, because they don't have the jurisdiction over the website. Let's say a website in the US is publishing something that Israel does not want it to be published. So the Israeli internet providers will be ordered to block this from having it for Israeli readers, basically. Now, obviously, there are lots of complications around this law because, for example, in the past, they have been issuing orders around content that is, let's say, if a Palestinian citizen in Bethlehem, I mean, Israel has been for many years and for decades playing with different laws, like according to what's benefits. So sometimes it's the martial law, sometimes it's the Jordanian law, I mean, regarding 67 areas, sometimes it's the Israeli law. So the question is, if the Israelis would ask, according to this law, Facebook company to delete certain content of a Palestinian citizen who's in, let's say, in Bethlehem, what will happen then, or in East Jerusalem? So because by the international law, obviously this is occupied areas and Facebook should not go through or with the Israeli law, but should have another approach to it. So it's a complicated issue, but this is a very alarming, I mean, it's very annoying and a very scary idea of having this total control. We have to say that basically Israel and the social media companies have a close relationship until now. And as I mentioned before, they have 90% of cooperation. So this would be total control on the internet and on the social media. And a relationship that is right now on voluntary basis will become on an obligatory basis, because it's court orders basically, and the companies would have to follow. And this is the situation that we're facing right now.
I know we touched on the cyber unit repeatedly asking social media companies to take down Palestinian content. Mona, how do they actually do this, and what is the actual effect that it has on Palestinians?
Yeah, thanks, Maha. I think Nadim has answered the first part of the question with his first answer. So yeah, they are basically sending hundreds of thousands or thousands of requests to the social media companies to take down the Palestinian content, and they are succeeding to do so. But how is that affecting Palestinian people or users who are using the social media platforms? First of all, we in Palestine have this kind of chilling effect where young people or where users are afraid sometimes to share something because they see that other people who share this kind of stories or content on the social media platforms have been censored or it was taken down, or sometimes they are interrogated from the Israeli authorities. And having this kind of chilling effect between users is affecting definitely spreading our narrative on the social media platforms. And this also is reducing the let's say the political participation among the young people, because young people are now tending not to share so many things on the social media, specifically what is related to their political opinions. In a recent study that we at Hamle have been asking the young people if they tend to share their political opinion on the social media platforms, most of them they were answering that they don't want to share their personal things because of so many things. First of all, because they are afraid of being interrogated from the Israeli authorities. The other one is because they have this kind of fear from the society, and sometimes because their families are blaming them. And having said that, that means they are less likely to participate in the political activism, let's say, on the social media platforms. And anyone living in Palestine and can realize or can recognize that everything there is being politicized, and everything is really affected by this ongoing occupation, military occupation on the ground. So how can we depoliticize people um, if they are living this kind of politicized reality? I mean, if everything is being politicized and they can't share their political opinion on the social media platform, that's a big problem. The other thing is we have a high self censorship. So whenever we are posting something, we should think that Facebook must be shadow ban this, or they could be take down this content, because they have this DOI list, which is the dangerous organization and individuals. And whenever we are sharing anything related to this, like it's basically they said praising, but sometimes there is like a fine line between what is praising and when people are sharing news, because also the Israelis are reporting this kind of content. So people now also are thinking really if they want to share or to participate, and whenever they are writing a specific kind of content, they read it for the first time, second time, and sometimes 10 times before sharing that. And they tend to write sometimes without dots, or sometimes splitted letters, and sometimes they use icons, as we saw in May, where people were using the spoon to point to the sex prisoners, and sometimes they are using the watermelon to point to what's happening in Palestine. So we are using such kind of let's say icons and stickers, and sometimes creative ways. Let's say sometimes they are using like long spaces in the words. But let's like think critically about that, because these social media platforms are adapting the AI systems, and the AI is usually trained by machine learning. So as much as we are repeating things, these machine learnings have been like learned, and like they know what are we writing. So if we are writing in splitted letters, by repeating that two, three, and many several times, they got to know like this word means that word, and they can catch it in the next time. So this kind of systematic censorship for the Palestinian voices is badly affecting sharing our narrative on the social media platforms. That's like on the internal, let's say, level. But if we are thinking on the external, on the international level, that's also affecting our audience. That's also affecting the international audience who are just like watching. So the international audience, some of them like they are pro-Palestinians, some of them they are pro-Israelis, and some of them they are objectives. They don't have like pro-Palestinians or Israeli positions. And when we are sharing the human rights documentations on the social media platforms, or when we are sharing our stories, we mean to, first of all, to contact our allies to tell them what's happening on the ground, but also we have this kind of thoughts that we want to attract the objective people to let them understand what's happening on the ground. It's just sharing this information with them, and then they can think what kind of position they want to take. Censoring Palestinian voices is preventing us from having this kind of space to contact people, to contact international audience, so they can think what's happening here. And that's not easy, to be honest, because that means this digital space is being now opened for one party over the another. And we have seen over May with the attack on Gaza Strip, how first thing the Israelis did is attacking the information centers. They attacked AP, Al Jazeera building. They were also targeting and bombing electricity stations, and also the internet was cut off of Gaza Strip. So that is a big indicator of how they think about this kind of conflict, or of this kind of attack, because it's a war on information, and they don't want Palestinians to share what's happening on the ground. So this kind of violations, adding to what Nadim said for legislations, is fair enough to silence Palestinians and to practice all the kind of human rights violations against Palestinians in order to keep Palestinians silent and not practicing their right to freedom of expression. And just to add on what Nadim said on the legislation side, they also previously were talking about two legislations. One of them is the cyber law, where Nadim maybe can explain more about that. And the other one is preventing journalists and activists from taking photos and documenting what the Israeli soldiers are practicing against Palestinians on the streets. So if we are preventing from documenting what the Israeli soldiers are doing to Palestinians, then we are also preventing to share that, and that's the Facebook law. And also they are having this kind of relationship with the social media companies. So we feel like we are censored all the time from all the levels, let's say. So yeah, that's basically
brings me to the point. So of course they've done this law where you can now censor Palestinians, but what if there was actually incitement of violence against Palestinians or hate speech against Palestinians? Technically, would something be done to remove that content, Nadim?
No, so basically not. Hamle has been following up on this issue and monitoring it, and we have been doing researches. Basically, we issue every year an index regarding incitement in Hebrew in the social media. And the point is to say that there is a bias in the way that also social media are dealing with it. The Israeli government and the Israeli law enforcement are not doing anything about it. It's very legitimate in Israel to incite against Arabs and Palestinians. In our last research that we have done, we found more than 620,000 posts that include racism and incitement and violence against Palestinians and Arabs, and all of this was not, was not deleted. Even at the level of having a hate speech lexicon from the side of the social media companies, they don't have that. Something that obviously in Arabic they have it a very developed way. And when we are talking about extreme and terrorist and violent Israeli groups, settlers who are attacking Palestinians, Facebook company was telling us, yes, you can provide us maybe with suggested list of names. Now you can do it with the Palestinians, and the DOI, as Mona mentioned, that was published. So the list was leaked, actually, not published, by the Intercept. And when we looked at it, so we found more than 55 Palestinian names of organizations and individuals. And we looked at the Israeli side, we found one name of Ben Stigofstein. He's a famous violent Israeli settler, and his organization Lahava. So basically, I mean, you can see also on the way that how the social media is dealing with it. I mean, obviously from the side of the Israeli government, we don't have so much expectations that they would really do it. I mean, this is a very systematic way on the way that enforcement is being done, what is legitimate and what's not legitimate, but at least also from the side of the companies who are claiming that they have a global policy and they deal with everybody and they don't have any kind of bias, etc. So clearly they are not in that place.
I can see some questions that have come in. Nadim, how do you estimate the stand of the Palestinian Authority in this regard? I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, from the side of digital rights, I mean, from one hand, the Palestinian Authority is pushing for the Palestinian narrative, and they have been doing, in some occasions, some meetings also with Facebook and asking about this. But from the other hand, they have been doing also very problematic policies. I mean, in the end of the day, we want to see a free and safe internet for everybody, that people can express their opinions, even if they are the political opponents of the mainstream that is ruling the Palestinian Authority, and people should not be suppressed because of their political opinions. And unfortunately, especially in 2021, we saw like cases of oppression, we saw cases of arrest. We saw also cases of hacking of social media coming from the security agencies of the Palestinian Authority, especially after the killing of the activist Nizar Banat last June. And lots of problematic policies that we have been documenting and calling against.
One more question. Amnesty International joined B'Tselem and Human Rights Watch in declaring that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid. What effect, if any, do you think this will have on digital spaces?
Nadine, do you want to answer, or should I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, basically, we also are talking about the digital discrimination, the digital discrimination against Palestinians on the social media platforms, and not only on the social media platforms, but generally Palestinians are also deprived from the right to access many digital economic platforms like PayPal and other platforms. So we are talking about systematic digital discrimination against us, and that could also be understood as apartheid, digital apartheid against, because what's happening on the ground is also like ongoing on the online spaces. And we see that the digital rights are the extension of the human rights on the digital space. And that's like our starting point to start talking about this kind of systematic discrimination or about apartheid. So what's happening on the ground is also continued on the social media platforms, and like it's a vice versa, this kind of relationship. So it's also affecting Palestinians on the social media platforms. It's also suppressing our voices there, and we have seen like many platforms, as not only PayPal, but maybe we can give example on YouTube, we can give example on Google and Google Maps, how Google Maps are complying also with the Israeli narrative. They are not showing the Palestinian marginalized villages on their maps, while they can show the Israeli settler on the first layer on their maps. You have to zoom several times, hundreds of times, to see these Palestinian marginalized communities and villages, while the Israeli settlements are not also having this kind of illegal settlements, which is violating the international law. The Google Maps also are not showing any kind of military checkpoint that we used to pass it through to go or to move between cities. So Google Maps is also discriminating against Palestinians. If you check just your phone and you ask Siri about Jerusalem, it can tell you many things about this kind of, we can call it digital divide, digital discrimination, digital. There are many academic names, but also many activist titles that could be given to this kind of reality that Palestinians are living on the ground and on the digital spaces. So yeah, we also are witnessing same things happening on the internet and on the digital spaces.
Maybe just to add to this point that also the power relationship is also obviously reflecting on the online in a way of how Israel is dominating and controlling the Palestinian life. So the telecommunication sector is totally controlled by the Israeli, the Palestinian telecommunication sector. That has been like since 1967, and according to Oslo Agreement and Paris Agreement, the economic agreements later, it was supposed to be an independent sector. Now, obviously, the Israelis never let it. So the internet that Palestinians get goes first through Israel, and Israel control it. Similarly with the telecommunication, any equipment that the Palestinians would want to import, obviously, because Israel controls the borders, they have to get the Israeli permission, and the Israeli won't allow it. So they are making sure also that digitally and technologically, the Palestinians are way behind. So for example, in Gaza Strip, it's still with the 2G. On the West Bank, the 3G came lately, just a year or something ago, while the world is now in 5G. I mean, the Israeli companies are suggesting 5G for their customers. So they're making sure that the Palestinians are way behind technologically, and to make sure that the dominance and the control is not only on the offline, it's also obviously on the online.
What about, Nadim, you were saying, so what the situation is in the West Bank, what about in the 48 areas, Palestinians living in Israel?
Yeah, so I mean, similarly with the Palestinian citizens in Israel, basically, I mean, you have big areas in the Naqab, in the Negev, in the south of the country, basically, especially with Bedouin population, villages that the government of Israel does not recognize. And as a result, basically, there is no infrastructure, there is no streets, no phone, no telecommunication, no internet, obviously, and the people have lots of struggle around it, especially in the times of COVID-19, and that the students are home and they need to study. And how they would obviously have these Zoom lessons without having the infrastructure. So it's very problematic. But even like in cities like Nazareth in the north and the Galilee area, the services that you get in those towns is also more expensive, and less packages and less services and with less quality than what you would do if you are in the neighboring Jewish city. So the differences and the discrimination is also in the areas of 48.
I'll read out a couple more questions. This is something actually I was going to ask. Do you think grassroots pressure on social media companies to stop collusion with the Israeli government would be successful, or would such pressure have to come from other governments to be effective? Who wants to? Mona.
Sorry, can continue. Usually, how social media companies are
I can't really hear you. I don't know if it's the same issue with everyone else.
Maybe with the mic, something with your microphone, Mona.
It's quite bad. It's like patchy, I think.
Okay.
Now it's better.
Now. Yeah, it's better. Don't move.
It's better. Okay. Okay, no worries. So basically, I saw also another one question in the chat box that also is asking about Facebook whistleblowers. So basically, with the advocacy thing, like with the social media platforms, how it's working is having as much pressure as we can, because that when we are talking about the grassroots work is not enough, because we should think about the intersectional work, and because of that, Hamle is leading coalitions and is part of networks on the local, regional, and international level, where we organize with other organizations around the world and in the Arab region to put pressure on the social media companies to comply with the international human rights law and to stop discriminating digitally against Palestinians. But this is also not enough. To be honest, over the past years, we've been like negotiating with them, putting pressure on them, and working hard to stop them from having this kind of digital discrimination against Palestinians. We've seen like their real move was in May, when the international mainstream media was taking action and was having this kind of reputational damage for these social media companies, because they have this kind of fear. They want their reputation to be decent, and they don't want this kind of harm for their reputation. So when the international mainstream media start interviewing us and asking us what's happening on this kind of thing, they start responding much more faster. They start like having much more positive impact. I won't say now they are perfect, but at least having better responses from their side, and they start like have this kind of development, let's say, on their policies. And they even we have this year one turning point where we were all the way we were pushing to have this kind of investigative report, how they are or moderating the Palestinian content or the Arabic content, and how they are dealing the Hebrew content. And for the first of its time, the oversight board, the Facebook oversight board, were recommending the same recommendation that we used to talk about. And Facebook adapted that recommendation, and they are now working on this investigation. And hopefully they will publish that, because the oversight board is also recommending to publish it publicly so people can understand how these content moderation policies are going. So having said that, that means that all this kind of efforts is really helpful. On the other side, over May and over the past year, we've seen many whistleblowers, and also we've seen many, let's say, employees unions and public statements from employees from within these companies were publicly attacking and talking about the digital discrimination against Palestinians and how these companies are dealing with the Palestinian rights. All of these were really like powerful, especially with the whistleblowers and with the public statements from the employees, either from Google or from Facebook. So all kind of efforts, organized efforts, is really helping us to stop censoring or to reduce censoring Palestinian voices and spread our narrative on the online spaces.
Darna, so what is being done within the country to stop this law from being passed, and what do you believe would be effective for the Palestinian diaspora to do to raise awareness on this issue? So how can we raise awareness?
It's important to speak about it and to have opportunity also to have it to mainstream media and different media outlets, and as much coverage and pressure that would be important. And I guess part of why in the last round they did not pass it, it was also because of international pressure and how it's affecting the, the image, etc. But right now it's also, the situation is not easy at all, because also within the Israeli society, obviously the laws also impacting and influencing the Israelis. And even with organizations who are supposed to be kind of left-wing and more kind of having a democratic approach, their argument with the government was basically, let's skip all the social aspects of the law and keep it only for terrorism cases, which means it's a kind of code word, like let's keep it for Palestinians and skip it from the Jewish Israeli citizens. So it does not look good, but nevertheless, I think it's important to raise awareness about it and to have the struggle. And we at Hamli are planning to have to launch a campaign against it. And we have been also having several meetings with some of the Arab Knesset members and the Joint List and other different stakeholders. And we're hoping that this pressure can stop the law, or at least maybe change some parts of the regulations inside the law.
Have you, I was just thinking now as you're saying, has Hamdi actually been pressured by the cyber unit or anyone trying to censor your work?
Not directly, not until now. We know that there are smear campaigns from time to time for organizations and individuals, Palestinians, and obviously in 67 areas, but also Palestinian citizens of Israel. Some academic personality recently was attacked and smeared, and this ongoing. So we, until now it didn't happen, but we expected at a certain point that this may be happening.
A question about, I think you've kind of answered this question about any positive outcomes of the disclosures and debates regarding Facebook whistleblowers, Francis Hogan, in the US from the Palestinian perspective.
Yes. So, Nadim, you want to add something?
No, I was just saying it's a good always to have more information coming from inside employees, especially like, for example, with the DOI list that came out through whistleblowers, and it was published. So in many cases, also all these kind of official answers of the companies you do not really get the point out of them. So this helps us a lot and help our advocacy work for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Muna, were you going to talk about any positive outcomes?
Yeah, so Nadine mentioned the DOI. I mentioned also the case of the investigation between the Arabic and Hebrew. And that was obviously because like of the pressure from the organizations, from the media, but also from Facebook employees who have this public statement. But also, if we are talking about the efforts, we can't ignore the efforts from states, third-party states, and other organizations who might or from people who might put pressure on their governments, on their representatives, congressmen, and also the MPs to have this kind of pressure on the social media platforms to comply at least with with the international human rights law, and also to the business and human rights principles, because that's important, and not only in the Palestinian case, because we don't see ourselves as exceptions. We are part of the world. And there are other minorities and other indigenous groups around the world who are also suffering from the same kind of digital discrimination. In May, we were not alone. Indigenous people of Colombia were also suffering from the same thing, because they were attacked from the civic and the streets, and Instagram have been taking down their content. And in the public statement where Instagram apologized to Palestinians, they apologized to the indigenous people of Colombia. There are many other people in Kashmir, in Myanmar, in Western Sahara, and many other parts of the world who have the same kind of effect from the social media discriminatory policies. So we should join our efforts to have this kind of impact from the third party states and from other from the normal people, to put pressure on the social media companies to make a better or safe, fair, and just social and digital spaces.
How would you, like, if we wanted to do something now, what would we do? Would we write to like the to the Instagram CEO, or like what do you do?
Well, Nadim, do you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, well, that depends on the case. We won't now write to the CEO of Instagram because it's not an organized campaign. But you can usually put pressure on your representatives in the parliaments and in the decision making levels, so they can put pressure on the social media companies to stop this kind of against Palestinians. Also, there is another aspect, which is on the surveillance side, because Palestinians are also surveilled from the Israelis, where, as Nadine mentioned before, that they are controlling the whole infrastructure of telecommunication and ICT sector. So they are also surveilling Palestinians. They are using different tactics. I believe many of you have heard about the blue wolf that the Israeli soldiers are using to make a profiling for Palestinians. It's also connected with the facial recognition, the CCTV cameras in Jerusalem, in Hebron, and in many other places over the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Maybe Nadim can tell us more about the 48 lands, or for the impact on the Palestinian citizens of Israel. But also all this kind, and with the white wolf as well, because the white wolf is also being used by settlers to make for Palestinians.
I think maybe you need to
going.
give us just a quick, like, what is blue wolf and what is white wolf, just for people that don't know.
Okay, so the blue wolf is using by the Israeli soldiers, and it's one of the Israeli soldiers, ex-soldiers, that have been interviewed by a Washington Post. He said that this could be the Israeli Facebook, where they are making a profiling for Palestinian citizens, so they can, like, whenever they enter our information there, they can see that if this personality is quote unquote danger for them, and what is our security, if we form a security threat, quote unquote, again, for them. While the white wolf is being used by the Israeli settlers, who should not have like this kind of thing, to make profiling for Palestinians before going into the settlements, because there are many Palestinians who are working in the Israeli illegal settlements. So they use this to see the profile of the Palestinians before going into the settlements. So this kind of system, of surveillance system, is also being manufactured and tested on Palestinians before they sell it worldwide, because the Israelis also are trading with their military services and surveillance services. We have seen the NSO and the Pegasus thing over the past year, and how this scandal was really huge for the Israelis, and they were taking action for that. And it's at some point they had some diplomatic issues with other countries because they their people and their diplomats. So yeah, you can take action. You can put pressure on your government to stop trading this kind of surveillance technologies and spying technologies and malwares that were testing on us before being sold worldwide. I don't know if I missed something, Nadim. Maybe you can share what you think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a full. I mean, the Palestinians in general have been a kind of laboratory for the Israeli security establishment to test. I mean, historically, also before the digital times, and now especially with the digital times of testing all these equipments and technologies. And it's not also Israel-Palestine issue; it's a worldwide issue, because these technologies later on, so are being sold to many Arab regimes here, but in the region, but also to in Latin America and other African countries, where basically they are using this, especially oppressive regimes who are using this against political opponents. We all heard about Pegasus and NSO. So NSO is just one case of many others. And some of these companies are keep changing the name and changing. I mean, they get to a certain point where they are criticized and kind of blacklisted. For example, Anivision. So Anivision is a company that develops the facial recognition of all the cameras in the West Bank that Mona spoke about. And later on, they changed their name to a different name, and they do this rebranding. But they keep selling basically these technologies. These technologies, and in many cases without any kind of constraints and without any checking and any balances, and mainly to oppressive other regimes. And this is a problematic. I want also just to say another maybe one point about the issue of what we can do. I mean, Hamle is also doing lots of different campaigns, and we call the people to join. For example, the latest one was around PayPal and to open PayPal for Palestinians to use. And we had this email storm for the CEO. There are different campaigns, like for Facebook, there was a campaign of many pro-Palestinians and progressive organizations last year called Facebook Let's Talk, and other campaigns. And we encourage everybody also. I mean, I think it's important with these Twitter storms, email storms, and the different campaigns, everybody can contribute and push the effort together in order to create some kind of leverage against these companies, because obviously this is very difficult. I mean, we're talking about companies who are huge, who are in many cases more powerful than even some governments. And it's not a simple thing to get to their policy and to influence, especially having also the Israeli lobby behind with all their power and money and lobby that is happening around that. So it's a big struggle. But still, we have the allies that we are working with. We have the human rights, the digital rights communities and organizations and the pro-Palestinians. And I think our efforts should be much more coordinated and much more focused, hopefully.
There were a couple of questions again about how to help. Someone was asking, are you getting any help from the EU or other international entities? And then just to add on to that, is it worth contacting Nick Clegg, former Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, who I think has a role with Facebook?
Yeah. He actually had a meeting in the last crisis in May with the Palestinian Prime Minister, and actually Mona was part of that meeting, and Hamle prepared for that meeting, and we were part of this. But he actually before that met with Benny Gantz and with the Israeli side, and the meeting with the Palestinian was after only pressure. But the point is, yes, I mean, executives at Meta now with the new name, as many effort as many pressure on them is more than welcomed. I mean, I don't think that the EU officials and politicians are really doing anything positive effort in that aspect, but any pressure on this and raising their awareness and speaking about how biased these policies is very important.
I'm not sure, Mona, maybe I think you touched on this a bit. Can one differentiate between the discrimination practiced by the social media companies voluntarily or out of fear from pro-Israeli pressure, and that's coordinated purposely with the Israeli government?
Okay, so there is definitely. The voluntary thing is the Israeli are observing the Palestinian content on the social media platform. And Nadeem talked about that in the first answer. They are observing the Palestinian content and sending thousands of requests to the social media companies. And we call this voluntary takedown because the Israelis are volunteering to do that. So the Palestinian content is being taken down. On the other hand, the social media company system, which has this algorithms and AI systems, is trained on a specific way to take down specific content based on their internal policies, which one of them is the DOI, which is a dangerous organizations and individual list, and many other things. As Nadeem mentioned, the DOI is not like it's kind of weird because when we look at that, we can see that there are over 50 Palestinian organizations and individuals. While if we look at the Israeli one, we can see only 2, and the individual is the owner of the organization. So that's kind of discrimination because they only give this kind of intention to the Palestinian side. They are not looking about the dangerous organizations and individuals in the Israeli side, but not. Yani, we can make a zoom out and we can look on the international scale. If you look at the DOI list, you can see how they are focusing on the Far East and the MENA region, and they don't have so many lists and of organizations and individuals worldwide, or let's say from the global north. So there is this kind of stereotyping that is translated in their internal policies, and their AI systems or artificial intelligence system is being trained in that way. So their machine learning is trained in a discriminatory way, and because of that, their content moderation policies is discriminating against Palestinians. And because of that, we have this kind of two sides discriminations beside the whole thing of the Israeli governmental operated NGOs that Nadeem mentioned, like Act IL and IL and others. So there are like systematic efforts to silence Palestinian voices, and there is a clear line how each one of them is working to silence our voices.
Yeah. Just to say and continue the same line, that basically, I mean, it's a power relation, and these companies obviously are going for the profit. They're going for the markets, and if we zoom out and look globally, like what's happening in Kashmir and with the Indian government, and if we look at the Rohingya and the Myanmarese government, there are similar processes and similar. I mean, if there is a strong government with the manpower, with the money, with the resources, you can easily also manipulate the narratives that is happening on the social media. And those social media companies are cooperating in a silent way with those governments because of the market. And at the end of the day, it's a combination of oppressive regimes who want to control the social media in any way possible, and you have a combination of a company that the main interest is the profit and the market, and they don't want that government would block them from the market. And the results are what we see on the field, which are very, very bad towards freedoms, human rights, digital rights. The same power relations that happening also on the level of Israel, Palestine, and Facebook.
Scary stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of, are there any more questions, or have we missed anything? Anything you'd like to add? Actually, we've got a thank you here. Thank you for the excellent work you're doing at Hamde. And this is a really long thing, which I'm going to try and read quickly. Nick Clegg won an unprecedented share of the vote in the UK generation. Nick Clegg is a stooge who will do what he is told, as are most people trusted in this area. Yeah, was there anything anything else to add?
I mean, I think we covered most of it, and we think that in generally there's what's happening is basically that with the power that the Israeli government has, with the advocacy and with much more organized and better organized side from the Israelis that is coming in the shape of these gongos and the groups that are supported by the government, We need the side that is supporting the Palestinian cause, and we need to be much more organized. Our voice should be louder. And we need to reach out, because I don't think that, just saying that these social media are biased and, to finish the story there and not to do anything is not a solution at all. We have to be there. Our voice should be heard, and we have to insist that we have these rights and to fight for them and to organize ourselves in a much better way. And I think one of our weaknesses is that in many cases, between the diaspora and the homeland and the other allies, etc., things are going not in a well-organized way to convey our messages towards the companies and the public opinion in the different countries.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to be going downhill, and scary stuff with White Wolf and Blue Wolf. Yeah, something needs to change. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to have you on again. It was an excellent discussion. And for the people who joined us, if you would like to donate to the Galilee Foundation, we support underprivileged students. So, everything we raise goes to underprivileged students, get a higher education. So yeah, sign up to our newsletter, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much, Nadim and Muna.
Thank you. Shukran.
Take care. Thank you for everyone for joining. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye.